Alright, today we're going to talk about writing inequalities. So writing inequalities means how can we take something that's in words and change it so that it is in symbols and numbers. So we're first going to go over all different kinds of symbols that you might see. This first symbol is the less than symbol. That stands for less than. So for example, let's say I said that 2 is less than 5. The easiest way to tell what it is that the smaller number, if it's less than, will be eating the bigger number. So I want you to imagine that this right here is like something with teeth. It's like an alligator. The 2 is eating the 5 because 2 wants to get bigger. So 2 is less than 5. This symbol is the greater than symbol. So you might do something like 3 is greater than 2. Now, there's a couple of ways you can write this and read this, and I'm going to do this up here. 3 is being eaten by 2. So 3 is greater than 2. If you want to read it from this way, 2 is less than 3 because the 2 is eating the 3. These two symbols are similar except we add one more part. Because it has this line underneath, we add an equal to. So this symbol is less than or equal to. This symbol is greater than or equal to. Now, because it has this equal to, I could maybe write an example like 3 is less than or equal to 3. Because I have this equal to, I can have the same number on either side because this number has to be less than or equal to this number. So when we're doing inequalities, we also sometimes have to graph them. And to do that, we use different dots. So if it is a less than or a greater than symbol, we're going to use an open dot. So if you see your number line, you have maybe a number like 4 here, and you put an open dot. This is an open dot. We use that for less than, and then we also use that for greater than, both open dots. When it is less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, we use a closed-in dot. So we fill the dot in. These are both closed dots. It's really important that you remember, do we use an open dot or do we use a closed dot? Alright, now let's talk about some phrases that we might see. Alright, we might see something like 5 is less than 10. Right? That's literally 5 is less than 10. Okay? That would look like 5 is less than 10. We might see something like 5 is fewer than 10. Now, the key thing here is to remember is fewer than. What that means is that 5 is fewer than 10. It's going to be smaller than 10. We might, for greater than, we could see something like 5 is greater than 2, and that will look like 5 is greater than 2. That's the simplest we could see. We also might see that 5 is more than 2. That means the same thing. Now let's talk about these two because these two are a little bit tricky. And to illustrate this, I'm going to use a variable x instead of a number to make it a little bit clearer. So the first thing we might see is that x is less than or equal to, let's say 3. So I might say x is less than or equal to 3. Now something that's a little bit trickier is you might see something like x is at most 3. Now, this would be written the same way. We would use less than or equal to for at most. The easiest way when you're going through these to figure out what to use is to think about a real life scenario. So let's say that I was tutoring kids after school and I said, I want at most 3 kids to tutor. If I said at most 3, I do not want more than 3. I want less than 3. So I'm going to use a less than symbol because at most, the most amount of kids I want is 3. At the same time, would it be okay if 3 kids showed up? Yes, at most I want 3, but it is also okay if I have 3. So that's why we include the equal to. Let's do another example. Let's say you might see something like x is no more than 3. X is no more than 3. So let's use our same tutoring example. If I said I want no more than 3 students in my room to tutor, what that means is that I don't want any more than 3 kids. If I have 3 kids, is it okay? Yes. But I don't want any more than that, so I'm going to use a less than or equal to symbol. Let's talk about the greater. The simplest one you're going to see is something like x is greater than or equal to, let's say 4. Well, x is greater than or equal to 4, so that's going to look like x is greater than or equal to 4. We'll talk about some other ones you might see. We might see something like x is no less than 4. X is no less than 4. Let's talk about this in a real life example. Let's say that I have office hours and I tell my students, I want no less than 4 people in my office hours. I want no less than 4 people in my office hours. Does that mean I want less or I want more than 4 people? That means I want more than 4 people to be there. I want no less than 4. So we need to use a greater than symbol. Is it okay if 4 people are there? Yes. So I can include the equal to. So let's do a couple of examples. First thing I want you guys to do is I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and I want you to right now go through and try to add in inequality symbols to this, between these numbers. So I'll do the first one with you. Let's say we have 5 and 6. So I need to figure out, do I want to put a less than, do I want to put a greater than, a less than or equal to, or a greater than or equal to? Well, 5 is less than 6, so I'm going to put a less than symbol. Is 4 going to be less than or greater than 0? 4 is greater than 0. So go ahead and try to do these on your own, and then when you're ready, press play and you will see the answers. Alright, here are the answers. Go ahead and double check. Two of the ones I want to talk about is, let's talk really quickly about 4 and 8. So it's a little bit tricky with negative numbers. I'm going to really quickly, I'm going to draw you a number line as best I can. Let's say that here is negative 30, here is negative 11, here's 0, and then over here we have 10. If you're asking yourself, remember, the bigger the negative number, the smaller it actually is. Negative 30 is actually less than negative 11. And an easy way to think about that is to think about temperature. If you had the choice of it being negative 11 or negative 30 outside, which one would you rather have? Probably negative 11, because negative 11 is warmer than negative 30 or bigger than negative 30. So remember, the smaller the negative number, the bigger the negative number, the smaller it actually is. Alright, so let's do a couple of examples. Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about is what to look for so that you know whether to put an inequality, an expression, or an equation. So some key points. The word is, or the verb is. The verb is tells us whether it is an equation or an inequality. Something to note, that if there is no is, it is an expression. Now, remember that we can have present and past tense of words. So the past tense of, another tense of is are. So we might see is, we might see are, but both of those are the verb, and that's going to tell us if it's either an equation or an inequality. When you know if it's an equation, it will just have the word is. If it's an inequality, it's going to say is, and then after is, it's going to make some sort of statement. For example, it might say less than. It might say greater than. It could say more than. Some sort of phrase will come right after is, and that tells us that we are doing an inequality. So right now I'm going to give you 3 examples, and I want you to write these in the margins. You might have something like 9 less than a number. You might have something like 9 is less than a number, or we might have something like 9 minus 3 is 6. So let's talk about all these different phrases. Alright, I'm looking at this first one, and I'm looking, is there an is? I don't see the verb is. That tells me that this right here is an expression. So I'm going to go ahead and annotate it. 9 less than, remember we need to flip, less than a number. So this is literally written as 9 minus a number. Or I'm sorry, x minus 9. 9 less than a number is written as x minus 9. I'll take this example. It says 9 is less than a number. So I see the word is, so that tells me it's going to be an equation or inequality. And then I also see is less than. This tells me it's going to be an inequality because it has is and then it has a phrase right after it. So 9 is less than. Now, how do we write less than? We're going to just use a less than symbol. Notice that when it's an expression, we flipped it. When it's just an inequality, we do not flip it. So 9 is less than a number. So we write this as 9 is less than a number like x. Let's do this last one. 9 minus 3 is 6. Alright, I know it's going to be either an equation or an inequality because I see the word is. And I'm going to annotate 9 minus 3. There is no is and then a phrase. It's just is and then 6. So that tells me I'm going to have an equal sign and 6. So 9 minus 3 is 6. Alright, let's do a couple more examples so we can really get these. I'm going to move to the next page. So, one thing that we should always do is annotate. And remember, the key thing we're looking for is the word is. So this says all numbers that are more than -5 and 16/10,000. So the first thing I'm going to look for is there and is. Is there an is? Alright, let's see. All numbers that are more than -5. I don't see an is. But, if I think back to my notes, we talked about sometimes you might see a different tense of the verb. And I do see the word are. So, I see the word are. That tells me it's going to be either an equation or an inequality. So now I'm going to see, after the word are, is there a phrase? Yes, there is a more than phrase. So this is telling me that this one is an inequality. So I'm going to rewrite that. All numbers. Alright, if it's saying all numbers, I need to pick a variable to represent that. All numbers that are more than, so I'm going to use my more than symbol, -5 and 16/10,000. Now, just a little bit of review. Let's talk about how we could write this out. 5 and 16/10,000. I know 5 is going to be like this, and tells me to put a decimal place. 16/10,000. The 10,000th place is 4 places after the decimal, and I need to fill it in with 16, so I'm going to put 16 at the end and fill in with 0. So this would be 5.0016. Here's our expression. Notice, because it was an inequality, we did not flip these around. Even though it's like a more than or less than, we don't flip it around unless it's an equation or an expression. So let's do another example. It says a number is. Oh, I see the word is. So now I know it's going to be either an equation or an inequality. but it says is no more than. Because it has is no more than, that tells me that this is an inequality. So I'm going to think, okay, is no more than. So I'm going to look back at my graphic organizer and say, which one is no more than? I'm going to think back to that example where I said that Miss Declan wants no more than 3 students in her room for tutoring. Is no more than. That is a less than or equal to. And 1,750. 1,750. So X is no more than or is less than or equal to 1,750. So this one, 56 less than a number is less than or equal to 15. Alright, there's a lot going on here. So let's first just go to where we see the is. Alright, I see an is. That tells me it's going to be either an inequality or an equation. But I notice that it says is less than. That tells me it's going to be an inequality because there's a phrase afterwards. So is less than, oops, and I forgot to include the or equal to, so it is less than or equal to. Let's go back to this beginning part. This is where your symbol goes, either an equal sign or an inequality sign. This stuff up here is part of the expression, so let's annotate this as we would just like an expression or an equation. 56 less than. Notice there's no is, so we need to flip this. 56 less than a number is less than or equal to 15. So what I have here is a combination of something that I need to rearrange, an inequality, and then an answer. So this will look like X is less than 56. 56 less than, X less than 56 is less than or equal to 15. Getting myself confused. Lots of less than there. X less than 56 is less than or equal to 15. Let's do 2 more. We have a number cubed. So a number cubed is greater than, here's my symbol, a different number. So let's use Y. Is greater than. Is, and then a phrase that tells me this is an an inequality. So greater than, I'm going to use the greater than symbol. So X cubed is greater than Y. Look at this very last one. The sum of a number and 12,000 is 19. Okay. Equation or inequality? Think about this one. Equation or inequality. I see an is, but so I know it's an equation or an inequality, but there's nothing after it. Because there's nothing after it, this one's going to be an equation. So I know this is going to be equal sign. So let's just annotate the rest. The sum of a number and 12,000. How do I write 12,000? It's going to be, this is the 10th, 100th, 1000th. So 0.012 is 19. So the sum of a number and 12,000 is 19. Okay. Make sure that you have these notes down. We are going to do some practice in class to go over these. And please make sure you watch the next video, which tells you a little bit more about inequalities.